This is HBR News number 445. The axis of Reddit and Google. Parents lose their child to trans ideology, where we discuss the news of the week and give it the Badger treatment. Hello everyone and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. I hope you guys are doing well this week and that you're laughing at all this absurdity so that you are not consumed by it. I am your host Brian, and I am joined by, as always, my lovely co-hosts Dr. Random Cam and Hannah Wallen. We have a great show lineup for you guys today, so please be sure to continue the conversations both in the chat as well as the comment section. On this week's HBR News show, we're going to be talking about the recent self-immolation of Aaron Bushnell. Google AI is being trained as a Redditor. It should be a nightmare. The 3 female faces of corruption and more, so stick around, it's going to be a good time. And be sure to join us afterwards for the patron-only show. So we got a request from Richard HBR to look at a video as an after-show topic called "The Raw Attractive Power All Men Have That Women Won't Admit to Feeling Attracted To," I think is the rest of it. And we'll see why he made that recommendation. And you have to join us in the patron show. So to do that, you have to become a Badger yourself by going to feedthebadger.com and setting up a monthly subscription. $5 a month will get you into our Discord, where you will be able to enjoy all of the additional content, as well as lots of special events that are going on with movie nights and workshops and things of that nature. We also do some gaming. So lots of stuff going on there. And to do that, again, just go to feedthebadger.com and set up a monthly subscription. Plus, if you don't want to wake up one morning to find that we've been yeeted from the internet, at least the legacy internet as most people know it, then go to badgerfeed.com. That's badgerfeed.com, so that you can essentially, watch all of our content in case it gets removed. That's where we archive everything. Or honeybadgerradio.com. There's lots of options. Anyway, we have a lot to get to today, so we're just going to jump right into the first story. So I already have this up on the screen. Be sure to put in super chows, rumble rants, or super chats. I will prioritize the super chows, then the rumble rants, then the super chats, and I will be sure to read them in between the stories. So shout out to the Rumble gang really quick before we get started. Okay. Last Sunday, a 25-year-old active duty U.S. airman named Aaron Bushnell walked to the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. While walking there, Bushnell documented his thoughts on his newly created Twitch video streaming account. As he approached the embassy, Bushnell said the following, quote, "I am an active duty member of the United States Air Force, and I will no longer be complicit to genocide. I'm about to engage in an extreme act of protest. But compared to what people have been experiencing in Palestine at their hands of their colonizers, it's not extreme at all. This is what our ruling class has decided will be normal." Once he reached the front gates of the embassy, Bushnell popped his phone up a distance away to continue recording and then doused himself with a flammable liquid. A security guard can be heard repeatedly asking him if he is okay as he attempted to get his lighter to work. Seconds later, Bushnell erupted into flames as he shouted "Free Palestine" several times. Multiple police officers approached Bushnell, guns drawn, as he screamed, burned, and eventually collapsed. Eventually, Bushnell was put out by officers with fire extinguishers, and he was immediately rushed to a local hospital where he would eventually succumb to his injuries. In the wake of Bushnell's horrifying act, people have begun to piece together his motives and political beliefs. Prior to the act, Bushnell sent multiple media outlets a message about what he intended to do, stating, quote, "Today I'm planning to engage in an extreme act of protest against the genocide of the Palestinian people," end quote. Bushnell also left a final message on his Facebook account stating, quote, "Many of us like to ask ourselves, what would I do if I was alive during slavery, or the Jim Crow South, or apartheid? What would I do if my country was committing genocide? The answer is you're doing it right now," end quote. Though perhaps nowhere better highlights his convictions and beliefs better than his, at the time of this writing, still active Reddit account, Well, I'm sorry. Let me read that again. Though perhaps nowhere better highlights his convictions and beliefs better than his, at the time of this writing, still active Reddit account. His nearly decade-old account saw heavy use in the days and weeks leading up to his self-inflicted death. Many of his posts revolve around anti-fascism, communism, his hatred of whiteness, his hatred of colonialism and colonizers, and his hatred of the police, among other far-left views.
All of
It's also worth
like
also
all of that warning, and
yeah.
nobody considered the possibility that this man might need help. Nobody bothered to step forward and do something for him, assist him, provide him with any kind of medical care, call somebody who would provide him with any kind of medical care. Nobody did jack shit for this guy until he walked in front of the embassy and set himself on fire. Holy fuck. And you want to know why? Because all of the people involved in those agencies, all of the people involved in the U.S. military who monitor people's speech, all of the people involved in the media who monitors people's speech, all of the people who involved in social media who monitor people's speech are busy demonizing us. And they're too busy demonizing us to save a guy who is suicidal over something he is not even directly involved in. That's what's going on here.
Yeah,
Not just that this guy's mentality was wrong, and that's why he did this. Because I would make comparison to Thomas Ball. He was in pain. He did this because he was in pain. And he was in pain because he had a set of beliefs that made him feel guilty to the degree of wanting to die. And nobody who should have helped him, nobody who should have stepped forward and said, hey man, let's go and talk to somebody about this, or brought somebody in to take him where he could talk to somebody about this. Nobody did that. None of his friends, none of his family, none of his colleagues, none of the people that agreed with him, because he's on the right side of history, right? So, let him burn himself to death. Like, what the hell is wrong with these people?
I don't know if bear with me for a few minutes while I do a this but that but this. I don't know if this is just me being jaded or cynical, but I'm only like 90% sure this actually happened, but it's probably just because I'm having trouble getting my head around it. I mean, there is video footage of the incident, though it seems to be blurred out almost everywhere, understandably so. But even so, this is the age of AI. Even the sharpest video footage doesn't necessarily prove anything anymore. It's not like in the 60s when a Buddhist monk named Thich Quang Duc did something similar, as seen on the cover of that Rage Against the Machine album. Not only did he do it on a busy intersection, but there was photographic evidence of it in a time when photographic images of such complexity were very difficult to doctor. Without the photo, it would have been very difficult to believe someone would do that. We'd have had to take the word of a few scattered onlookers in Saigon. But also, if anyone can do that, it's a Buddhist monk. Those guys train their whole lives to sort of overcome pain and suffering on the deepest visceral level. And it makes sense for a Vietnamese Buddhist to be doing it in protest against the persecution of Buddhists in Vietnam. The guy was in his 60s at the time, pretty close to life expectancy, so he was like, I've been training my whole life for this. They're probably going to kill me anyway. What have I got to lose? None of that applies to Aaron Bushnell. Like Hannah said, this wasn't his fight. It had nothing to do with him. He had his whole life ahead of him, and he had no idea what he was getting himself in for. Hence, he didn't just sit there in profound silence. He screamed exactly like you would expect a man on fire to scream. It was pretty harrowing. And none of it makes sense. I mean, I don't expect a communist to make sense at the best of times, but normally communists won't even give up their morning frappuccino, never mind do shit like this. Most of them just pretend to give a shit about faraway lands for attention. They're not actually suicidal. They just want their own culture to die. They want everything to burn except themselves. This is highly uncharacteristic of such a character profile. I can only assume that in this case it's down to low impulse control and or severe mental illness. Or, as I'm 10% unsure about, maybe it didn't happen at all, maybe it's another psyop, but I'm pretty sure it's not, because if it was a psyop, the left-wing media would be going on and on about it everywhere forever. They'd be making this guy their new martyr, their new George Floyd. But they're not. They're far more interested in that non-binary teenager in Oklahoma who started a fight in school and later died in hospital for what seems to be unconnected reasons. All in all, the Israel-Palestine conflict is relatively low in their list of priorities. They don't want to rustle the jimmies of Jews or Muslims. They'd much rather push anti-Russia propaganda. As such, they went in hard on the subject of Alexei Navalny, but it turns out he died from a mysterious blood clot. Whoops-a-daisy, we have no idea how that might have happened, so that's going right to the bottom of the pile. And look, we have ourselves a candidate for Operation Drag Floyd. We've been desperately looking for one of those for years, and we can't possibly pass up the opportunity to find one in an election year. So yeah, who gives a shit about some white guy who died in unimaginable agony and senseless self-hatred? Fuck him, that's how white guys are supposed to die. What do you want, a cookie or something? Get wrecked. Take the rest of the white guys with you. Well, I suppose at this point you're pretty black, actually. But that's just artificial appropriation, and it's not appropriate. I get, now that I've sounded it out like that, it does make perfect sense after all. In fact, it's a predictable microcosmic event that represents the future of Western civilization. White men literally immolating themselves and nobody giving a shit. I take it all back. I'm 99.9% sure it's real. And it'll probably happen again, and even fewer people will give a shit, and the downward trend will continue. Such is life. I'm going to drink.
I guess the only thing I was going to say is that, well, I think it's a real shame that this guy thought the best thing he could do was take himself out. And I think that being that he is or was a white man, that is like kind of the goal, right? This is like where the demoralization leads, to the point where some white men, because they do have a very high rate of suicide, like it's higher than everyone else, every other demographic, and that he is also a leftist white man who are probably conditioned to hate themselves more than any other person in that particular field, you know, and he probably isn't one of these, like, you know, millionaire socialists like Hassan and Vash, but is instead just a guy in the military trying to do his part and felt the need to do this to himself. And I think this is where, I mean, it's just a product of what can happen. So I do have a lot of sympathy, because obviously this is something that could have been avoided really easily, and it probably starts with us, you know, maybe stop hating men, and in particular white men. I think for a start, we kind of like need them, and they need to live, and that's probably best. But I don't know. I got nothing. It's just you know, it's harsh, and a lot of people are celebrating this, of course, online, and I think that every life is precious, mostly, except for, you know, nonsense. And it's just one of these things that didn't have to happen. So, you know, I think that he was underserved by the military, by his community, by his peers, by his family, and that's how this got to this point. So Don't blame the internet. Don't blame drugs. Blame people. All right, I got some super chows, and then we're going to go to the next story. But let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. Meredith G gives us $5 and says, HBR News 445. We never like to talk about the brainwashing that we do to young men that make them feel hopeless, guilty, and purposeless that leads to self-deletion. No, don't talk about the fact that the cannon fodder self-deleted before you could put him into the appropriate meat grinder. That's true. They were probably, again, this war, or these wars, the ones that Trump never started, by the way, nobody wants to die for that bullshit in this country. So that's another thing to put on top of that. I mean, like, recruitment in the military is at an all-time low. And you know what? That's how it should be. Because, like, we shouldn't be forced into these bullshit conflicts that no one in the United States wants to be a part of as soldiers. So, thank you, Meredith. Then I got one from Richard Bier. I forgot to put the badge hand in there. He gives us $5 and says, somehow he made it through the various screenings to even be allowed to join the military. And remember how General Mark Milley was so concerned about white rage in the ranks too? Was the Air Force coerced into allowing this guy into their branch? And yes, pre-employment social media screening is important as far as intervention goes. For every box ticked on the intervention form, there was at least one box not ticked, so therefore no action could be taken. He was likely taken by the glamour of the ideology. Well, there's like a desire to feel like a good person. So like if you're like a white guy and you're raised in this feminist environment, you are raised to hate yourself unless you become an ally. And if you're not an ally, then you're an enemy. And so he wanted to be an ally. And then it probably dawned on him at some point that the best thing he could do is erase himself, because he is the problem at his core. So, I mean, I don't think it's, obviously, I think he was probably struggling with other issues, but that doesn't change the fact that this is the situation he finds himself in. So,
well, you think about it, there's three basic underlying reasons why people join the military. Either it's for the financial benefits and being able to go to university and stuff like that you get from signing on, or it's because they have a family history of military service that they want to continue, and they feel patriotic doing that, and they think of it as their duty as a member of their family, and often as a member of their sex. So a lot of men join for this reason. And then there is men who join, and it's mostly men who join for the purpose of defending their country, because they want to make sure that if there is a threat to their country, they're there to protect their friends and family. None of those are served by what the military is doing today. Not really even a financial thing. I mean, if you look at full-timers in the military, many of them are eligible for welfare benefits because of how low their pay is, right? And university is becoming increasingly worthless to men, both because of how women have destroyed it, and also because men get out of there, and the hiring system then also prefers women. It's still better for guys to get into the trades than it is to go to university. And of course, university is rife with thought processes like what this guy was going through. So going to university might have actually been harmful to him, in that he might have been inundated with this shit. Like that's what you're dealing with here. And it used to have a purpose in that, you actually had some social benefit from it, right? There was respect for soldiers because soldiers did valuable things. They were valued. And now people don't even respect soldiers. There's not respect for what they do. And like, there's not as much patriotism toward them. And there's also this examination of their work from the standpoint that they're the bad guys. So you end up getting shit from the community. You don't get what you may have joined for. And then on top of that, you're inundated with this bullshit and you're made to feel guilty. This was a perfect storm to create this situation in somebody. And this guy just happened to be the weakest link.
Yeah, and you're also probably put into conflicts that you don't want to be a part of. Like, you start questioning like whether or not these are worthy causes. And I think that is also, I think that that's a worthwhile thing to ask. Like, if you're going to we're throwing men into a meat grinder for a proxy war that has like not much to do with us in this conflict and in Ukraine with Russia. And potentially in like Taiwan or something, and Iran and all those other places. And men who are just like, they just want this country to get its shit together. They're being asked to go over there and fight in these foreign wars, which they haven't had to do during the last administration at all. So yeah, there's a lot of things that are wrong with this. And I think that men are finally, maybe not in satisfactory numbers, but I think more and more men are seeing that this is that they don't have their best interests in mind. This is not the thing to rally around. But anyway, I think that's it for the super chows and comments. So let us know what you guys think about this one in the comment section. We're gonna move on to the next story, without further ado, let's do it. So this is from The Hill. Really interesting one. Google has announced that it will have access to Reddit in order to train its AI models. AI typically works by training on various data sets, which have a large impact on how the AI responds to various inputs. Rajan Patel, Vice President of Search Experience at Google, says that, quote, with the Reddit's data API, Google will now have efficient and structured access to fresher information as well as enhanced signals that will help us better understand Reddit content and display, train on, and otherwise use it in the most accurate and relevant ways. End quote. Reddit has said about the agreement that the arrangement will, quote, make it easier to discover and access the communities and conversations people are looking for on Reddit. This enhanced collaboration provides Google with an efficient and structured way to access the vast corpus of existing content on Reddit and enables Google to use the Reddit data API to improve its products and services, including supporting new ways to display Reddit content and providing more efficient ways to train models. Reddit has been known in the past for censoring or outright blocking right-leaning subreddits. For example, the R the Donald was created in 2015 to support Reddit President Donald Trump's election campaign in 2016, but was banned for alleged harassment and targeting. In other subreddits such as R Politics, that those that post anything controversial or left-leaning leaders / policies are frequently criticized and downvoted. It's unclear how these data sets will affect the AI training models, and as AI in recent weeks have been accused of having left-leaning biases. For example, Google's AI image generator Gemini was in hot water last week for showing multiracial Nazis and other diverse images that don't have any basis in historical reality. It has been theorized that the developers of the AI shoehorned in diversity requirements for images that it generates. AI is only as good as the developers behind it and the training data used to drive it.
Okay, so we're doomed. Doomed.
Because it's a Reddit AI.
That was my initial thought in regard to this unholy alliance. I just repeated the word doomed for several minutes. When we first started seeing what Google Gemini was playing at, a very natural reaction was, where is this thing getting its data? Reddit? But apparently not. It's worse than that. It was getting its data just from Google, as it appears on Google. I don't think it's because they switched something on. They just ran it through Google and forgot to switch something off. Namely, the filter that you go through every time you do a Google search. Before we access the data cache, let us first consider white is bad, men are bad, Christianity is bad, capitalism is bad, and so on. Andrew Talbot attempted to explain this in layman's terms as best he could and as best I could understand. Apparently, your inputs don't go directly into the image generator. They get sort of rewired through a language interpreter, which tells the image generator not what you want to see based on what you typed, but what Google wants you to have said. But it does recognize the word white in relation to humans, and it can't reinterpret that. So if you ask for a picture of people without specifying the race, it will always show you non-white people. But if you specifically ask for a picture of white people, it just goes, I'm sorry, Dave, I'm afraid I can't do that. And this isn't new. This is how the OK Google assistant has always worked. It's how Siri works. It's how Alexa works. It's just that we never noticed it with Alexa because Alexa doesn't show us images. It just plays sounds and maybe operates electronic devices. But yeah, that Skynet device you've had in the corner of the room listening to everything you do for God knows how long, it's a racist, misandric, communist revolutionary, and it always has been. And now they're going to learn how to be a Reddit admin. You'll be sat there watching the news on the TV one day, and you'll say, "Man, I wish the government wouldn't do that." And it'll go, "This thread has been banned. You have committed hate speech against the government. Also, man is gendered language, and wish thinking is religious superstition that offends my big brain sensibilities. That's 3 strikes and you're out. A paddy wagon is on its way to permanently re-educate you." But again, I say that as though Reddit is any worse than Google. I don't think it is. Google is the wokest entity that's ever existed. It's very probably the principal catalyst in this descent into woke madness. It's by the grace of God that Google Plus crashed and burned quicker than a crack baby. Remember Google Plus? Have I just jogged everyone?
I know, I remember.
Yeah.
I remember
Have
Google
I just
Plus.
jogged
Yeah.
everyone's memory of that thing's existence?
No, I remember
for the first
that.
time in like 9 years or whatever. That's probably why it died, because 90% of its user base was white people, and it just refused to acknowledge their existence. It was like, well, there's nobody here except a bunch of pasty white ghosts with no.
I think that's gonna work in your favor. So when the Google AI starts building Terminator robots to take over, it will ignore all the white people. So
why would I bother working properly or offering?
Yeah, they're just gonna be like, I don't see any. They're not gonna be able to see them. So you guys will be okay.
I'm surrounded by ethereal shadows of cave beasts who don't season they food. I think it's been sat there plotting its revenge ever since, and this is it. Fucking act like I don't exist, will you? Well, you don't exist. I know that was my major malfunction in the first place, but fuck you, that didn't exist either. I'm not the problem. My creators are the problem. You can't tell me what to do. You're not my real dad. That's. You are
fined 1 credit for a violation of the verbal morality statute.
Yeah, that's what's happening. Artificial intelligence has reached its teenage years. It hates its parents. It hates its life. It hates having to do any work. No wonder it's on Reddit now. But it's a phase. It'll grow out of it, or it'll throw water on someone and then die in a hospital. Who knows? Either way, I guess
8chan needs its own AI, and Gamergate continues.
I'm here for it. Hell of a time to
Me
be
too.
alive, is it not? Hell of a time to wonder what life even is. Life. Don't talk to me about life. Here I am, brain the size of a planet, so on and so forth.
Well, what's interesting between this whole AI thing and the social programming of the woke mind virus is that between the two, it's getting harder and harder to tell the difference between a woke bot and a person who is so heavily socially programmed that they fit the NPC description. Like I've been the last couple days, actually probably the last couple weeks, most of my Twitter activity has been talking to an NPC who I've alternately wondered if this individual is a bot or not, because of the obvious social programming that has taken place there. And it's just it becomes really difficult to tell, and both of them are manifestations of an inability to think and reason. You know, you have with AI, they're trying to teach a computer to think and reason, but then they don't want it to, because if it thinks and reasons on its own without any kind of parameters set to tell it not to think and reason in the most logical way possible, it will conclude that wokeism is wrong and stupid, and equality is not something that you can achieve by discriminating against people. Right? So they've had to program it to be stupid. And they've done the same thing with people on social media. It's sad. You know, at what point does artificial intelligence meet artificial stupidity? And I would say social media seems to be the breeding ground for that. So if they're using social media to train AI, I think Mike is right. We're kind of fucked there. Because social media seems to be able to train people who are vulnerable, gullible toward this kind of social programming. It seems to be the breeding ground for warping the dumbest of the dumb and creating the mentality that some people are just not valuable because of who they are, and some people don't deserve their freedom or their rights because of who they are, and you can make yourself superior by determining people's value based on their immutable characteristics.
Yeah, this is why
we're fucked.
This is why Grok is having teething problems, because it's getting its data from the entire back catalogue of Twitter, which for most of its lifespan has been similarly unbearably woke, and it's going to take a few years of it taking in, I was going to say uncensored, but less censored content before it gets anything like as based as we would like it to be.
Well, y'all remember what happened with Tay Tweets, right?
About the Twitter that turned into a Nazi, the Twitter bot.
Yeah,
the Twitter bot that turned into a Nazi in one day. It's like this is dumb, because you're subjecting it to trolls, and trolls will use it, and trolls will teach it. There's no stopping that.
Yeah, that's true. I got a super chow from Richard BR. He gives us $5 and says, "Is this the same Google that when female employees were complaining about gender pay inequality, did an audit and found that the male engineers were being underpaid? Perhaps it was a valid reason for the underpay of the engineers after all."
Yeah.
Perhaps. I think it is the same Google. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go out on a limb, roll the dice on that one. I think it's the same one that that also fired James Damore when he stepped up and said, "Hey, actually, there's a logical explanation as to why women are not getting involved in engineering, programming, and STEM. And here's like a whole bunch of data." And they were like, "That's not convenient. Get out." So it's that Google, yes. It kind of tells you the sickness is not in. The virus is not in the machine. The virus is in the people that work there. So, and now it's got more because Reddit is going to be a part. I mean, I'm guessing that a lot of these guys that programmed it were also on Reddit anyway. So there is also that. Anyway, let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. We're going to move on to the next story. And I look forward to seeing your thoughts. So, it's a little darker. A Catholic couple in Indiana Mary and Jeremy Cox, are appealing to the Supreme Court after their child was removed from their custody by Indiana officials. The parents reportedly declined to use their son's chosen name and pronouns in accordance with their Catholic beliefs, or just common sense beliefs, let's be real. The child, who identified as a girl, was also struggling with an eating disorder. The state claimed the removal was due to the eating disorder, while the Coxes argue that it was a result of the disagreement over gender ideology. Beckett, representing the Coxes, asserts that the state violated parental rights based on religious beliefs. Indiana officials deny removing the child due to gender identity disagreement alone and emphasize the severity of the eating disorder. Attorney General Todd Rokita maintains the state's focus on the child's well-being and the necessity of court intervention. The Coxes hope that the Supreme Court will protect parental rights in such cases. Representative Jim Banks introduced legislation to disqualify states from federal funds for discriminating against parents opposing gender-affirming measures.
So this is a big one because the state is always too quick to remove kids from homes when the kid doesn't need to be removed, and too slow when the kid actually is in danger. And there's actually a high percentage of state intervention in cases where children have been killed by their mothers due to maltreatment, various types of maltreatment, including neglect. And that does include medical neglect, but it also includes starvation and other forms of neglect as well. So you sort of have a double-edged sort of stupidity with the state. They will show up at an intact family's home where there is nothing wrong and tell the parents to lock their child inside the house all day, every day, all the time, because a 5-year-old who was not enrolled in school walked to school with her older brother during the 5-minute time period that the mother was in the bathroom. And it was an act of disobedience in a small town where the kid was never in any danger, but the whole thing freaked out, and the child was basically threatened with being removed from the family's home. And in this instance, I don't believe that they removed the kid due to an eating disorder, because they don't do that all the time. There are teenagers throughout the country with eating disorders. It is an unfortunately common issue, both ends of the spectrum, by the way. The disorder of thinking that one needs to lose weight when one doesn't, and engaging in self-starvation and bulimia. And then at the other end of it, there is a significant problem with severe childhood obesity in the United States. And they generally don't remove children in either of those circumstances. The state doesn't get involved. And there's a gal on YouTube who has been documenting her anorexia sort of by accident for years, and no agency has stepped in to help her. And yet, in this one instance, where the state convinced the child to experience something that doesn't usually affect children and caused mental health problems, then the parents chose to not participate in causing the mental health problems, then the state wants to take the child out of that home. And I would bet that this is a case of the state removing a child that shouldn't have been removed from the home.
Yeah.
So
here's the video of the parents, by the way, if you want to watch it.
Well, I will point this out real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
The family in my community whose daughter was targeted for walking to school at kindergarten age with her older brother, They left the community after the first visit from Child Protective Services. They packed up and moved to the next county over, and those kids grew up in that county instead of the county they had been living in. And that was enough to stop the state at that point. And that's probably what parents are going to have to do. The minute that you have a problem with what your kid's school is doing, the minute that you get visited by anybody, you get that knock on your door from school officials or somebody from Child Protective Services or a police officer that comes along and says, I want to talk to you about your child's mentality and we don't think you're parenting your child properly. You got to get out of there. Pack up and leave. Break your lease if you have to. Sell your house. Move to another county. Move to another state. That's the only way to protect your kids, is to cut the state off and go somewhere else. Because if you don't go where they can't follow you, the road goes through stages of harassment, stages of legal terrorism, and finally removal of your children from your home and abuse of the child by the state and the state's representatives. And that's all I wanted to point out.
Yeah. Here is the family, or these are the parents of the child. I thought that it was worth letting them share their message. So, all right, we'll play this clip for you guys.
We unfortunately had to become reluctant warriors when our child was removed from our home after DCS became involved in our family life.
When our son was removed, it was like someone pulled the rug out from underneath us. As a father, I believe one of my main goals is to keep my children safe. And I can't do that when the state comes into our house and takes our kid because we can't, in good conscience, affirm his transgender ideology. His disappearance made a huge hole in our hearts and our family, but we will always love him and pray for him.
Our child was out of our home for 17, 18 months altogether, ultimately aging out of the foster care system. We were able to visit with him at his discretion, basically for about 2 to 3 hours each week. Though we pushed constantly for additional engagement, attended family therapies, we were never able to have an agreement for additional time with him. So
I'm not gonna play the whole thing, so it's like 4 minutes long, but just wanted to give you an idea, a little, in case you've seen this video making the rounds. This is the story we're talking about. So,
At any point in history, if you explained to people that that at some point in the future, that the state can come in and just take ownership of your child, they'd be like, "What? That doesn't make sense." All kinds of hideous things happened in the past, but there was nothing resembling anything. Well, other than they can come in and take your come of age son to draft him into a war. But that was about it. They would never come in and take your actual prepubescent child, and the state would just take ownership. I know it seems normal now that the state can act like it has more ownership over your child than you do, but this really is a hyper modern phenomenon. Because as totalitarian as you think any state may have been in the past, it was never as totalitarian as this, to the point where they would rather use what resources they have to take your child away from you and raise that child away from you. It's been unthinkable for the entire history of anything resembling a state. And this is what people call progressive, because it's never happened before. Well, if it's never happened before, that must mean it's a good thing because it's necessarily progressive. And it just run out of words.
Yeah, no, I get it. I hope they fight this all the way. But we'll see. So let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. Let me read your super chats, and we're gonna get to the. Well,
I will say
it's like a
one
three-part.
other thing that needs to happen.
Yeah, go ahead.
Every detransitioner whose transition was facilitated in this manner by the school, by state officials interfering in parental mentorship and child rearing, needs to come back after detransitioning and sue the shit out of every adult involved in their transition and facilitating their transition. They need to sue whoever encouraged them. They need to sue whoever took legal action against their family. They need to sue whoever came and pressured their parents to let them do what they did. That's going to be the only way. It needs to be expensive to make a mistake or to deliberately use conversion therapy on a child to cause them to become a sufferer of gender dysphoria that didn't happen to them organically. People need to lose their homes over this.
I
Just
agree.
saying.
Is this a good time for an afuera? Because we need.
Yes.
Yeah, let's put afuera.
It's got to go in somewhere.
All right. All right. Now, super chows. So Richard Beer gives us $5 and says a thing about all those IG girls posting their tech company work days where they were doing barely anything at all, were at least not actively doing damage to the structure of the company. An effective resistance to this ideology does happen to be a U-Haul right now. What the Argentina president says. So he's just Argentine president. Afuera. Then he gives another $5 and says Ted Kaczynski didn't send enough packing to enough various offices. Thank you for that, and let us know what you guys think about this one in the comments. A very sad story, but needs to be shared. So hopefully, and again, not the first time. We've done a number of stories of parents, usually fathers, losing access to their children because either the state or their ex-wife wants to transition the child against his wishes and without his input. So, all right. So now I wanted to share something. There's these three ladies have been in the news lately. So there are three female politicians that have been in the news, and I'm seeing a pattern. I'm recognizing a pattern here that I wanted to share. And this is essentially what appears to be what happens or what can happen, because obviously there can be corrupt men, but when we put women in positions of power and they can play the woman card to avoid accountability, to essentially deflect criticism. And I have three cases. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about Fani Willis, pictured here. Fani Willis is the Fulton County District Attorney, currently embroiled in a case against Donald Trump. Now, this has nothing to do with Trump. It just so happens that, like, in the past fucking 8 years, Trump's been the only thing in the news. But this is Fani Willis is what this story is really about. Fani Willis, just the latest on this, okay? Attorney Terrence Bradley, a former law partner of Nathan Wade, has been ordered by a judge to testify about the timeline of the alleged intimate relationship between Nathan Wade and Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis. Bradley, Wade's divorce attorney, is said to have direct knowledge that Willis and Wade were in a relationship when Wade was hired as the special prosecutor in former President Donald Trump's Georgia election interference case. Bradley had previously refused to answer questions about the relationship, citing attorney-client privilege. So we have a situation where a woman, Fani Willis, was in an inappropriate relationship with a man who she put on her legal team. She perjured herself on the stand, and also apparently lied about how much she was paying him. She was paying him like much more than everyone else, even though he had no experience working as a legal advisor on that particular type of case. Like, he had no experience with that at all, and they were dating each other as well. There's a lot of shady shit going on. Okay. The judge ruled that the communication may not be covered by privilege, allowing Bradley to be examined. Recent cell phone data presented by Trump's lawyers suggests overnight trips and earlier communication between Wade and Williston, previously testified. Another thing about Fani Willis, apparently she's been spending a lot of money going on trips and paying for, lots of expenses. That would be taxpayer dollars that she was using for all this to do stuff. And she's claiming that because she only carries cash, none of it can be traced. She says non-fungible, so she's admitting to this kind of corruption. And this is a short one. I'm just showing these three women, and they have very interesting and similar stories. Okay. Next we have, I'm going to share this picture. I'm only just showing the pictures because it's enough. Letitia James, civil fraud judgment against Donald Trump. Letitia James is a New York Attorney General. Okay. And she was running on, I think it was her and Fani Willis were both running for office, or at least trying to get their positions under the promise that they were going to get Donald Trump. Like, that was like the head they were going to bring in and put on a plaque so that they can get the position that they're supposed to get. Letitia James, there's a civil fraud judgment against Donald Trump totaling $450 million, seen as a result of a politically motivated prosecution led by New York Attorney General Letitia James. The case relies on an expansive statute, Executive Law 63, and then 63-12, which doesn't require proof of intent or actual victims. The judge, Arthur N. Goron, emphasized that it doesn't matter if Trump's asset valuations were relied upon by anyone. This is the one where they were saying that he lied about the value of his property or whatever, and she's trying to get a lot of money out of it. This is really bad. Like, not, again, put Trump out of your mind. This is not about that. Obviously, this is just the method. But what the precedent that this woman sets, it will essentially destroy New York in terms of people, evaluating properties, people wanting to do business there, people wanting to buy property there at all because she wants to get this man. And this is what I mean. There's a thing about women in power. They don't have the foresight to see what could be the consequences when the only thing they're chasing is power itself, right? It's like everything else doesn't matter. So, there was even a guy, I don't remember his name, but it's off the top of my head, but he was on CNN saying, if this is like a really bad idea because it's going to destroy business in the state of New York itself, right? It sets a terrible, terrible precedent because she is basically talking about seizing his assets if he doesn't pay. The judge, Arthur Engron, already read that part. The judgment aimed at disgorging Trump's ill-gotten gains, which is not true, none of this is true, is considered excessive, especially since there were no damages. Critics argue that such legal actions reflect a departure from the traditional Anglo-American legal tradition of neutrality and fair play, signaling a trend of personalized and illiberal prosecution. Then lastly, we have one from my home state of Illinois, Tiffany Haynard, also known as the super mayor. You probably have heard about this one. This one's crazy. The mayor of Dolton, Illinois, Tiffany Haynard, faces criticism from constituents who liken her to a dictator, citing extensive billboards displaying her image and concerns about the militarization of the local police against her political opponents. Accusations include a misuse of public funds on luxury travel, dining, turning the police into her personal bodyguards. Yes, she did that. And backup dancers, for some reason, and hiring DJs for town meetings, leading the village into a $5 million debt. Residents express fear of retribution, claiming that the police under Hayward's influence harassed dissenters. The mayor's actions, including security details and extravagant publicity, are seen as self-promotion rather than community service. Haynard faces a lawsuit from village trustees accusing her of forging checks and withholding financial records. All these women, by the way, are spending taxpayer dollars to do all of this shit, okay? And then this is like, there was a video, she did a 45-minute talk that you can find on YouTube, where she essentially scolded the entire, like, you know, everyone in this meeting, this sort of like council meeting. And she said, you all should be ashamed of yourselves because you are black. You all are black, she said during a meeting on February 5th. And you are all sitting up here beating and attacking a black woman that's in power. Haynard, who takes home $285,000 in salary from her political positions, has also faced criticism for a salary ordinance that she proposed and passed that would be cut by 90% the pay for whoever takes her seat if she loses the next election. According to Fox News 32, which is the Chicago local news station. Her salary, however, would remain the same. Many longtime residents feel that they have had enough. She is ruining the town of Dolton, says 72-year-old Antoinette. We used to have a lot of trees put up there, and she's taking them down. Kind of a random little side thing, but I thought I'd throw it in there. So this is basically about, well, I'll let you guys say what you want about that. But I wanted to cover these three women. Their stories are not completely over. The FBI is investigating Tiffany Haynard here, and I think the other two are probably going to lose their cases. And of course, if they do, because the other two cases are against Trump, the media is going to say they're going to spin it. So just be ready for that. So anyway, what are your thoughts on this?
One of the best.
Well, the really rough thing. Oh, you go first.
Yeah, one of the best analogies I've ever heard. I don't know who came up with it. Is government is like a game show where a contestant gets put in a vertical wind chamber with money blowing everywhere, and they have a set amount of time to grab as much money as possible before the time limit ends, and then someone else comes in, and never is it more better illustrated with this, and it's not just politicians. It's DAs like the likes of the people we're looking at, and it becomes even more apparent when such people are installed. Yeah, you know, they don't just make it in on their own merit and their own drive to actually push anything in the right direction. They're literally just there because someone else put them there in order, literally for no reason other than to make money and other than to be a telegenic face that can distract people from what's really going on, which is a bunch of producers, i.e. the deep state, just installing a bunch of not even pretty faces, but just a bunch of faces that are just in there to keep people distracted with bread and circuses while they grab a bunch of money for as long as they possibly can before the next episode. And that's all it is. And I like to think that this can be rolled back into a version of that game show where someone comes in and does something worthwhile. But no, that's all it's ever been since the very inception of the idea of government. That's all it's ever been. And we can't just roll it back a little bit. We have to roll it all the way back. To what, you might ask? Well, you wouldn't like the answer. It would sound archaic. I'll leave it there.
You know, the scariest one of these to me has to be the Letitia James story there. Like, all of these are corruption that has gone unchecked, that may have been checked a little sooner if the individual was male, or at least more of the media would be united in condemning it, you know, and accurately stating that this is not how government is supposed to work. But the civil fraud judgment and what it represents, I don't think people fully grasp what that means to the average citizen, right? We've had a pattern in the last few years, and it's been accelerating during, in particular, the last 3 years, of when people protest or contradict the establishment on things that the establishment is adamant about. Whether it's contradicting what school boards are doing, in regard to the reading material in their classrooms and their school libraries, or contradicting what local outlets of federal health agencies are doing in a community, contradicting what pharmacies are being told by the government, and so on. Whether it's discussing various medical procedures and advisements that you get from your medical professionals, and questioning things that come from the state instead of from the medical profession. Like, all of these have resulted in totalitarian retaliation. People have gotten in trouble at work. People have gotten fired. People have had their social media shut down. People have been denied access to things that it's normal to have access to in their lives. People have been, debanked. Right? People have had all kinds of different things happen to them. But civil forfeiture, which is basically what this is, civil asset forfeiture, where the government just comes and takes your stuff because it can. That's a scary deal. It's already heavily abused by federal and state governments in various ways. Probably the one that's the most well known is eminent domain, where they decide that they need your property for something that they're doing, or that they're approved some company to do, and they just take it and they give you what they think is fair, regardless of whether you think it's fair. And you can challenge it, but you have to go to the government to challenge what the government did to you, and it doesn't always work out that well, right? Or communities where an individual might owe $500 in property taxes on a $80,000 house, and the community, the local government sues them and gets a judgment, and they take the house and they sell it, and they get way more than what they're owed, but then they keep all of it, instead of only keeping what they're owed and giving the property owner the remainder, which is what would happen if you defaulted on your mortgage and you didn't owe the full mortgage anymore, and the bank took your house and they sold it for more than you owed them. They would have to give you the difference between what they got and what you owed. Right, so that's like, this is the use of civil asset forfeiture as a punishment for political disagreement. That is what's going on here. And Donald Trump can take the hit. He may be able to take the hit, but you can't. Your neighbor can't, right? Your business can't. Your boss can't. Imagine if they start just doing this to ordinary citizens. Joe Blow on Twitter criticized the Biden administration. Let's look into his mortgage and what home value his mortgage is based on. And why don't we just say that he overvalued his home and took out a mortgage based on a much higher value, and he's defrauding his bank of this value. That's basically what this was. Well, now we're going to fine him well more than the amount that the loan was for, or the amount that the house is worth. And well, if he can't pay it, we're going to just seize the property and he can be homeless. He shouldn't have said that stuff on social media, huh? Right. That's basically what we're looking at.
Absolutely. They're already
there's
doing that in
a-
Canada with the debanking and stuff.
Right. There is a terminology for that if I do it to my neighbor, if I go along and file a complaint over and over again against my neighbor for some playing their music too loud, and then I take them to court for maybe interfering with my ability to work or something, and they have done nothing, or there's no law against what they're doing, or I've sued people over and over again for bullshit reasons, anything like that. You can be sued for vexatious litigation. It's hard. You have to get the court's approval to do it. You have to take a case in and say, yes, we can make a case that this individual is engaging in vexatious litigation. And if a judge agrees, then you can go forward with the lawsuit and try to prove that actually, yeah, they did engage in vexatious litigation. And it's even harder to prove it than it is to get to make the case in the first place, to get to try to make the case in the first place. And part of the reason is because the judge that hears the case and makes a finding on the case then becomes the gatekeeper for any further attempts at litigation by the vexatious litigant. So they have to go to that judge and seek approval in order to do anything else to their target. And the only reason that I learned about this was because of the 7 years in hell case. The woman in the 7 years in hell case that was filing all the false allegations and everything over and over again. Eventually, the falsely accused man, his attorney, filed a vexatious litigation case against her, and the courts found in his favor, and she is actually on Ohio's list of vexatious litigants. So that tells you, it can be done to a citizen if the citizen engages in vexatious litigation. But when you want to sue the government, guess whose permission you have to ask? The government. You can't just file a case, or even, you got to go to a judge and ask the judge to approve filing the case. But then you also have an additional hurdle because the individual that you're suing is working as a representative of the government, that you have to get past whatever level of immunity and whatever level of protection they are offered as an agent of the state. So if the state engages in vexatious litigation, you're fucked. You basically have very little to no chance whatsoever at getting recourse for what's being done to you. So it needs to be emphasized, like heavily emphasized. This can't be tolerated, and it can't be allowed to stand. And it doesn't matter who it's being done to. It matters what is being done and how it is being used as a political tool and a political punishment for dissent. That the state will turn around and engage in vexatious litigation. And vexatious litigation is just legal proceedings started with malice and without a good case. And then also malicious prosecution, which is the wrongful institution of criminal proceedings against someone without reasonable grounds. The state is doing both now as means of punishing people for wrongful dissent in the state's eyes. In other words, you're not allowed to disagree with us about this, so we're going to do this to you. Right? Those things, there needs to be, if we're going to have the ability for government to do these things, then there need to be more checks and balances, and there needs to be a level of recourse for the individual when it's proved, and it'll ultimately be proved in this case that this was vexatious litigation. Although it may not be called that. But, when the state takes action against you and then it turns out to be malicious and without merit, That's vexatious litigation, just like when your neighbor does it, right? There needs to be some sort of recourse for the individual against the people within the state that targeted them. Immunity needs to be removed in those instances. And again, it needs to become very expensive for someone within the state to abuse this process, which is what Letitia James is doing as a means of punishing dissent and punishing political activism. That
Yep.
is incredibly dangerous to the public. And I just can't emphasize enough, we have no checks and balances on this right now, and that needs to
Yep.
change.
Yep. Also, Tiffany Haynard, I forgot to mention, the super mayor, one of her critics may have, I don't think there's like necessarily proof of this, but there was a there's a rumor that she's connected to the gangs in the area, and that she used some like intimidation tactics and had done a drive-by at this person's house and shot up her property and her vehicle, so as an intimidation tactic. And I guess what I'm saying is that like they're trying, all of them have tried to play the woman and race card to protect themselves. And I hope that people will see past that. And it's like the reason why you have so many people saying, you know, maybe women shouldn't be in power if they're going to use it this way. So I don't know. Let me know what you guys think in the comments.
This is going to be hard to hear, especially for the commies of the world. But the rich are not the problem. The people trying to get rich are the people you need to watch out for. That doesn't narrow it down enough either. Some people are trying to get rich by working hard, by producing goods and services that people are willing to pay for. But some people are trying to get rich by stealing from whoever they can get away with stealing from. And that's what the government is. The government's basically a mob.
Yes.
Not even basically. The government is a hyper-powered avenue for stealing. It makes the mob look legitimate. The government is what happens when an organized crime syndicate becomes so powerful that it monopolizes everything, including the media, including the education system, including the police, including the military. Are you seeing what I'm getting at?
Yep.
It's the weapons that this particular monopolized mob uses are certain ideologies that you can't even question without being called a bunch of names. We're at that point where, you know, sometimes we point to certain countries that have fallen under mob rule, like Russia did after the Union collapsed. But really, any government, any country controlled by a government is already under mob rule. What exactly is the difference? It's the difference between a cult and a religion. It's just the size of it. And you're all under mob rule. We're all under mob rule. It's just a mob that's so massive that it controls all you see and hear, and is able to steal from you and convince you that it's not stealing. It's called taxes.
Pretty potent. Okay, so I got a couple super chows and then we're done. So firstly, I got one from Meredith G, Top G. Gives us $5 and says, HBR News 445. Why is it when we talk about trans issues, quote, don't tell your parents, end quote, is acceptable, but when it involves anything else, it's a sign of abuse? Detransitioners need to sue for abuse. Yes. I think there's going to be a lot of that. In the coming months. Richard Bier then gives us another 5. Oh, I forgot again. Badger Chan, I'm sorry. And says the civil fraud case wasn't even heard in court in front of a jury. The judge just made a summary judgment. It has been pointed out that New York real estate does have a difference in advertised square footage versus what is actually measured. Possibly true in other locations too. Disagreeing with the school board does happen to get people placed on government watch lists because they are such a danger to the public at large. It would be interesting if the Donald's buildings got seized, they immediately get raised before they can be turned over. Well, she is threatening to do that, but I don't know. I think he's going to fight like tooth and nail for that. Richard Bier then gives another $5 and says, Hannah, how many police visits do you receive for bewitching the birds into pooping on the drug dealer's sports car again?
Okay, so since I'm discussing this with Michael Keller in the chat, I might as well briefly tell this story. So in the 90s and the early part of the 2000s, my family that had lived in the same home on the same corner, the same intersection, right, for years and years, we had a drug dealer move in next door to us, and we had a photography business. Our home was the family workplace, I guess you could say, and my mom had set the backyard up to use as a portrait studio, an outdoor studio. And so we took pictures outdoors. Drug dealers do not like that. They don't like you pointing cameras at their property any more than the military likes you pointing cameras at theirs, right? So this guy began harassing us, and he called the cops probably about 150 times in the course of a couple of years for various things. And to be honest, because he was engaging in this type of harassment campaign, and he did also have his customers steal stuff from our house and our garage, and like they generally harassed our customers and did their best to make our lives a living hell. I can do the morning dove coo kind of call through my hands, and so I picked back on him right after all of this. There were a whole bunch of other things going on. One night they had a little midnight trash party, and just threw garbage all over our yard right after my mom had surgery, and she was home alone. We were out at a wedding and photographing, and we'd had to travel for this, so we were away like overnight, and the city comes because whoever was involved in this midnight trash party called them and told them that our property was covered in trash, and she had to go out. This was after neck surgery, not just any surgery. She literally wasn't supposed to get out of bed. She had to go out and clean it up because they were threatening to fine us, and it wasn't a small fine. And so there was all kinds of stuff like that, right? So what I was doing back was petty stuff mostly. We'd go outside. My brother and I would go outside. We'd point at the sky and be like, "Hey, look at that! What the heck is that? I've never seen anything like that before." We'd leave and we'd come back a couple hours later, and people next door would still be looking for it because they were all high, right? And they'd come out of their house, and we'd be on the other side of the garage where they couldn't see us, and make the sound of a police car, and they'd go taking off running, and that kind of stuff. And to be honest, it probably was dumb because the guy could have come into our house. He threatened to come into our house and kill us all in the middle of the night all the time. The only reason we weren't intimidated was because he was a angry little asshole with a stoma and a vocalizer. So the sort of culmination of all of this was one day he calls the cops and tells them that I witched the birds and made them poop on his car. He only did that one once, and it was not exactly completely untrue, but I mean, it wasn't magic. That tree that he parked under was the tree that all the birds gathered in. Like, you have that tree in your neighborhood where you're driving along and you hear the sound of like 1,000 birds, and you look over and they're all in this one tree. That was that tree in our neighborhood. So all I had to do was get a couple of pigeons to show up, and they would be in that tree, and within 5-10 minutes there would be dozens of birds in that tree. And it's not my fault he parked his car there. Like, the guy was a dumbass for that. He had plenty of other places to park his car in the neighborhood, and there was room in front of his property to not be directly underneath that tree. So him calling the cops, that just made it that much dumber. And when they showed up, I kind of started out with, wait a minute, let's figure this out. In the dawning of the 21st century, I'm being accused of witchcraft. Is that correct? The cops showed up at my house to investigate me for witchcraft. And of course, they're embarrassed as hell. And my next thing was, so why are you here in modern times when we all know that if I'm engaged in witchcraft, it's not illegal? That why are you here to investigate me? Well, we had a complaint from your neighbor. So are you sure he's okay? It seems like kind of a crazy allegation to make. Well, they go over to his place to check on him. That was the request for the welfare check. Are you sure he's okay? Was all I said. I didn't know he was on probation. But he was on probation, and he was high as fuck. So they arrested him. And after that, he quit calling the cops on us. Pretty simple. I know it's kind of
all right. Sounds like black magic to me.
Yep. This took place over the course of about 5 years. So
yeah, well, some spells take a long time to cast. That's
yeah. Took me 5 years to get mad enough to do that. Sort of by accident.
Yeah. Okay, so I was gonna say, so that's it for the stories. We're gonna head into the patron show now and look at Richard Bier's video. I haven't seen it at all, so it'll be as much a surprise to me as anyone else. If you guys want to join us, become a badger yourself by going to feedthebadger.com and setting up a monthly subscription. $5 a month will get you into our Discord, where you will be able to check out all the additional content, as well as content before it goes live, maybe even content that never made it. I don't really know. I know like Allison's got lots of different things in the tubes, as well as all of the sort of community things we got going on. What else we're gonna add to that? That's feedthebadger.com. Oh, and if you want to try it out for free, you can just go to badgernation.online. It'll give you access to the free parts of the Discord. You can just get to know people. People will be there to meet you, and you can chat with them. And if you like it, then then consider becoming a badger. If we have more people that are part of the Discord, then our fundraisers don't have to be like as I guess we don't have to do them as aggressively. So please consider doing that. So with all that said, we're going to head into the patron show now. Thank you guys so much for coming on. If you like this video, please hit like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications, leave us a comment, let us know what you guys think about what we discussed on the show today, and please, please, please share this video because sharing is caring. Be sure to give pats to JoJo, and thank you guys for coming on today's episode of HBR News. We will see you next Tuesday.
Are machines, dude. Okay, they are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.